Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready to dive into another deep dive with us?
Absolutely. Always excited to dig into these fascinating topics.
Me too. And today's particularly interesting, don't you think? We're talking all things communication.
Yeah, it's something we all do, like all the time, right? But I bet most people haven't really thought about all the layers beneath the surface.
Right. And we're lucky enough to be diving into this based on some amazing research we found. It's from this really insightful academic podcast. Really gets into how communication really works, the nitty-gritty.
And it's not just about talking as communication kind of thing, The source material really dives into how complex communication is, even just defining it.
So if it's more than just talking, what is it then? How does this research explain it?
Well, they frame it around this idea of shared understanding, which I thought was interesting.
Shared understanding?
Yeah, like finding ways to convey meaning. And it's not just through words. It could be gestures, music, even medical symptoms can be a form of communication when you think about it. Never thought of it like that.
Right. It really makes you realize how interconnected we are, even in ways we don't always recognize.
It does. It's like suddenly you start noticing all these subtle ways we're sending and receiving messages all the time. I mean, have you ever had those moments where you realize you are not on the same page with someone at all?
Oh, constantly. It's like you're speaking different languages, even when you're both using the same words.
Totally. And that's what this example from the Pastaza region really highlighted for me. The researchers talked about how the same exact message can be interpreted in completely different ways depending on the social context.
Oh, right. I remember that. That was such a good example of how much we rely on these shared assumptions when we communicate, often without even realizing it.
Totally. They talked about this one specific miscommunication where a visitor was thanking their host for a meal.
Okay, I think I know where you're going with this. Yeah, so the visitor kept saying things like, "Oh, I couldn't eat another bite. I'm absolutely stuffed," which, in many cultures is like a polite way to show you enjoyed the meal.
Exactly. The last thing you want is for them to think you didn't like the food, right? So you emphasize how much you ate.
Right. But in this particular cultural context, saying you're full could be misconstrued as implying you weren't given enough food in the first place, which would be really disrespectful.
Whoa. That's a completely different interpretation and could lead to a huge misunderstanding.
Exactly. And it really struck me because it shows how important it is to not just listen to the words themselves, but to also consider the speaker's background, their culture, their experiences. All of that factors into how they're communicating.
Absolutely. And that's where understanding different codes becomes crucial, wouldn't you say?
Yes. This whole concept of codes totally fascinated me. So for anyone listening who's like, codes, what codes? Basically, the source material uses this term to describe those shared systems of signs and symbols that groups develop over time, like a kind of insider language.
Yes. It's like those you had to be there moments, or understanding a joke that's specific to your friend group.
Exactly. It highlights that communication isn't just about the dictionary definition of words, right? It's about understanding the subtle cues, the shared history that gives those words meaning within a particular group.
Totally. Think about a time you might have felt like an outsider because you didn't understand the slang or the social cues of a particular group. Those are those codes at play.
That's a really good point. And it also shows how important it is to be sensitive to the fact that other people are operating from different sets of codes, which can easily lead to misunderstandings.
Absolutely. Being aware of those different codes is a huge step toward more effective communication, for sure.
100%. Which, speaking of different layers of communication, made me think of the whole verbal versus nonverbal thing. I'll admit, I forget how much I rely on nonverbal signals until someone points it out.
Oh, me too. We tend to put so much emphasis on the words being said, but those nonverbal cues, facial expressions, tone of voice, body language, they can completely change how a message is received.
It's true. Think about how a simple phrase like, "That's interesting," can take on a totally different meaning depending on the speaker's tone or their facial expression. It could be genuine interest or total sarcasm.
Right. Or how about when someone says something's fine, but their tone says the exact opposite?
Oh, the dreaded fine. Classic example. But what's interesting is that those nonverbal cues are often unconscious. We're not always aware of the messages we're sending through our body language or tone.
So true. Sometimes you don't even realize you're giving off a certain vibe until someone points it out. It's like this whole other language we're speaking without even realizing it.
It really is. Honestly, this whole deep dive has just made me realize how much I've been taking communication for granted.
Same here. It's one of those things you don't really think about until someone starts breaking it down, and then you're like, whoa, there's a lot more to this than I realized.
Right. It's not just about the words we say, it's about the context, nonverbal cues, those shared codes. It's a lot to keep track of.
It really is. But hey, that's why we do these deep dives, right? To uncover those hidden depths and become more aware.
Exactly. So for everyone listening, as you navigate your day-to-day, here's something to ponder. Think about a recent miscommunication you've had. Could different codes, a misunderstanding of those nonverbal cues, have played a role? It's a question worth considering and might just unlock some surprising insights into your own communication style.
Such a good point. And who knows, maybe it'll even help avoid some of those misunderstandings in the future.
That's the goal. All right, everyone, until next time, happy communicating.
See you next time.